Okay, she just knocked this sucker over, and I don't know how long it's going to be working. Just finished up Struggle of Empires, and what I have to say, I have very mixed feelings on it, really. But I think that's mainly a personal issue rather than anything. I mean, when I started the game, I was very, very excited. A little peeved about what I feel to be the historical inaccuracy in the base design, as well as the allowing countries to start where they kind of at random, so that, you know, it does not make sense to me historically to look at, you know, Prussia, for example, with a big naval presence and colonial venture. Not just because Prussia didn't, but because there are significant factors that went against, say, a Prussia or an Austria being able to have a big colonial empire. If anybody could have, from the Mediterranean side, for example, and the Baltic has similar issues, it would have been Venice and Genoa. And they had their colonies, they had them in the Mediterranean. They weren't able to ever expand out of it because they just didn't have the routes out. And in terms of the Mediterranean, the routes were a land route coming through, say, the Sinai area, where the Suez Canal really is, and Gibraltar. And you don't have one of those, and you don't have the real land route of the old silk caravans or whatever, but that is long out of play by the time this is meant to represent. Well, you don't get out. You don't get out of the Mediterranean. You just do not. You know, you don't see a country like Austria able to colonize. The Baltic's similar, even though Sweden did have a colonial presence. It was very, very limited. And there's no way they could have maintained it in the face of naval interdiction of, say, the, Sund or whatever. Or for different terms, the Helgoland Bight. And I mean, those are both proper words for it. That's disturbing. There's no question. But then you step away and say, okay, what about as a game? And as a game, it excited the hell out of me. I was fiddling around. For maybe the first war really was enjoyable. The second war started to drag more. The third war, I had to force myself to come to the table. And I'm not sure exactly why. Some of it feels like the complexity of all, and I went into this in the wrap, of all these counters and what the players hold and what they can do. And that definitely, I don't like when a game bloats that way. There weren't a lot of options early on. But I don't know how much that really is of it. And maybe it's just my spirit, my mood at this point, I'm not sure. But something really got in the way here. And I'm not going to say that it's part of the game itself, because I can't point to a single place in the game and say, you know, it really stopped being interesting because of this. I think there was sort of this sameness with the cycles of the wars, where it just doesn't feel like you're doing anything momentous enough. You're moving from one phase to another of a Euro victory point production schema. And that, I think maybe as I started to realize that's what this game is about, it started to depress me a good deal. Not to say it wouldn't be somewhat enjoyable with a group of people, but again, I'm so unaligned to a lot of the Euro principles in game design. And this one actually fits them very well, and I thought it would be another bridge over for me, like Imperial was. Imperial, you know, just a very beautiful game that just caught me so hard. Well, I was hoping this would be too, but it just doesn't feel like the mechanisms work as smoothly for me. It feels far too much like I'm trying to get these little advantages. Lots of little complexities on these tiles that I have to be aware of for every person. What it does kind of remind me of, and a game that I like actually a good deal, although I kind of hate playing it, and this may be in the same realm, is Age of Renaissance, which has that same sort of, you have to keep track of all this crap, and playing solitaire, it's really hard if you're playing all the different players. Playing multiplayer, you do have to still keep track of all this crap that other people are up to, and in a way, it bothers me with this as well. It's just there's too many advantages, bonuses, things to know about other players' positions that it kind of makes me feel like if I worked a little harder, I could really get a grasp on the game to the point where I could, be really excellent at it. But as it is, without that grasp and without that effort, I'm left kind of floundering about with something that I feel like I'm doing okay, right kind of things, but I'm not really convinced, that I'm taking actions, the best actions to win me the game, and I kind of don't care. I kind of don't want to put that effort in at all. In fact, I definitely don't want to. What about this game itself, some of the aspects? Well, the physical components, and if you've seen the videos, you can see the board has great texture to it, which you can't see. Very, very nice. The counters are high quality. Again, good texture on them. Little coins are, I don't know. They're serviceable. The big minus, the only real minus that I can level against this game is the rules writing. And there's a reason that, other than my own, unwillingness to put a lot of effort into something that only has a few pages of rules, but there's a reason that I missed several important rules. In a lot of cases, they're just one sentence here in a one-off in the middle of a paragraph, and I went into this before, and that's just, that's not the way to teach somebody rules so that they can, A, learn them well and really know what the key points are and kind of focus and picture them in their head after they've read the rules. When they go back and say, wait, I'm not sure this is right, they know exactly what to do. And then as a reference as well, and just that, that image of the page and where it sits on it helps you find the location. Now for me, for whatever reason, very busy pages don't work this way for me, even though maybe they do for other people with lots of pictures and color and everything. What works really well for me happens to be the old SPI paragraphs, case system. Among other things, if I'm wrong about where I found it, you know what? I'm pretty damn sure there's a reference there to another case number, because my memory will connect those well. With something like this, where it's all textual, pleasant to read, I'll give it that much, but it doesn't sink in the same way. It doesn't give you that image. As well, without the case system, you don't end up with a nice reference. When you want to look something up, you know exactly where to look, and you can follow the chain of references between some rule that you think's connected and where you really want to be. So, this is, I think, my second Wallace game, and both of them had this really bad habit in the rules, though, that goes beyond sort of the GMT rules into, I'm just going to put, key issues like conflict is going to be the difference of dice. It's totally different from every other game that, anybody has written. I'm just going to kind of bury that in the middle of a paragraph, and yeah, I'm sure you'll get it right. And the design itself is very elegant, but it's not intuitive to the gamer that Yeah, I'm gonna not add dice. Here's another issue. When I did try fiddling around in my head trying to see those differences, it's a lot harder mechanically as a brain mechanical action to do these differences than it is to just sum a pair of dice. We're so used to summing dice, we just know them by rote. So not having that advantage, discarding it, it's a major decision there that is going to slow the game down, I bet, with most people who aren't very, very familiar with playing this particular game with this particular dice system that's so different from any other. And that's kind of a minus there. You're going to have this kind of dragging on the die rolling that you wouldn't normally have with people who are used to being able to just see the dice and understand what they say. The sevens, that's mentioned well enough that I remembered it. I mean, for example, the difference of dice issue, I didn't even parse that out of the rules when I read it. It's clearly there, but there's not even enough highlighting that to make me realize it's there. With the sevens, if the dice add up to 7, you lose an additional unit. Yeah, there's a whole paragraph on that, actually. And there's no reason, I mean, I was aware of that when I read the rules, there's no question, but it fell from my mind in part because the rules seemed so simple and intuitive and everything, I just didn't go back and ever have to relook at them. So it wasn't until somebody pulled up and said, you know, you're playing that all wrong. You know, it's like, oh, what? And yeah, I mean, there was no need to look back at the rules because I remembered them all. I remembered them wrong. And then the final thing is alliance tiles going back at the end of the war. Again, clearly mentioned in the rules, to get rules to this size, where you don't have to, you know, repeat things or anything, that's a tough job. But I think maybe it went a little too far when it comes to especially the difference issue. But some of the other issues too, it's just, it doesn't stick in my head, and I didn't have to go back for things. There weren't a lot of things I had to look up in the rules, so I wasn't paging through them. That could be an advantage overall, but you better know what the rules are before you start. Anyway, my playing wasn't exactly, you know, the kosher play, right? It was missing a few things. The die roll difference being missing meant that attacks were much more random. And your bonus for an attack, you couldn't count on a low bonus being likely to give you a successful attack. It takes a much lower bonus to feel very comfortable with the difference as opposed to the sum of the dice. It also, the sevens increases your chance of losing something even when you have good odds on an attack, though. At any point you could roll that. And because the unrest is based on units you lose, there's sort of a pain factor in that that's maybe greater than the pain factor of just losing the unit in the combat. Overall, let's see what else. A little player aid sheet with the explanation of all the tiles is a useful thing, there's no question there. Having it in 3 languages probably isn't too good unless you have people who know all 3 languages at your table, unless you photocopy it, of course. But yeah, I found the rules definitely hindered my understanding of the game to the point where I didn't even know I didn't understand it. With some games like the GMT ones, I know that I know something's different, and I go back and I stumble through, and then I'm just miserable with the rules. I didn't feel that here. I understood these rules completely, except I didn't. And I think I'd rather have that. I think I'd rather just play a game wrong and not know than know that there's something wrong and not be able to find it. So in a way, this was okay. And it didn't take me long to find the issue once somebody pointed it out to me. It's just, it's not absolutely easy to read to retain, at least for my forebrain. All right, what else can I say about it? I mean, the system is definitely very elegant. There's no question there. And the choices that you're faced with are these kind of clever. You have to make some real decisions there. I like the backdrop of the alliances that prevent you from attacking half the players, so that you have this cute little mechanism to determine which side you're on. How realistic is that mechanism, though? I haven't spoken a lot about the historicity because, hey, the setup's just screwy. But this whole alliance system disturbs me as to how it's implemented for a setup system. The fact that it's just a bidding on who goes where, it doesn't really influence the sort of key balance of power concepts which drove the alliances during what I'm assuming is meant to represent either the whole of the 18th century or sort of the center of the 18th century. Other people have convinced me it's the whole of the 18th century because the 20 revolt loss, the loss by 20 unrest, is the French Revolution. And it kind of fits in. There's a little question in my mind, hey, aren't the Dutch kind of pretty much played out by that point, as much so as, say, Sweden is, and certainly more so than the Ottomans were. The Ottomans were a major force all the way up through the Napoleonic Wars, when the Dutch really were nothing. I mean, they were overrun almost instantaneously. They were more of a major force in the 7 Years' War, though. There's no question there, but still kind of on the fringe. And I would rather see the Ottomans, except for the Ottomans couldn't have expanded colonially. Well, neither could Prussia, neither could Austria. So it's kind of disturbing that way. But taking those aside, the idea of these political alignments happening, yes, it's player will, but it's not really in any way representing that balance of power situation that drove England against France again and again and again. I can't see the wars aligning that way. I mean, the war we saw there where England needed the biggest thrashing, well, it wasn't France that could give it to them, so what do? Well, France ends up allied to England just because France can't affect England heavily enough. There's also sort of you're not really allied with your allies. That's just you can't attack them. You could help them, but for the most part, the alliances are very loosely linked, and in a way that I don't think represents the military aspects here. You also don't really have the option to attack the home country, and there's no question that Prussia and Austria during the 7 Years' War were moving into key areas there. Russia almost made it to Berlin, basically. So the fighting is not quite as represented as in the game as the historical situation would dictate. But I think you have to walk away from all of that, you really do, because in the end, it's not a simulation. It's not trying to pretend to be one. You have to kind of look at it on the same level as, say, any other almost pure fantasy game based in a little bit on the Earth. Risk, Vinci. It belongs more in that scale than it does in something having to do with this 18th century representation. It may be somewhat inspired by the 18th century thought, but it's not in any way a real attempt to simulate either the challenges facing the countries there or the situation there. It's just a matter of, hey, here's the continents, and here are these countries. It's very, very light, and in some ways I actually would rather a pure fantasy game that doesn't use the Earth. for something like that. Just because you're going to get everything all wrong anyway. And I was looking much more for an abstract simulation, something that I could step away, that I expected at this level, at the Euro level, no question, but that actually felt like it could represent the real historical situation. I don't know what to go to next. I'm kind of stumbling around blind recently on this, and I'll probably get something out, but we don't know what. But yeah, in summary, I have to say, I think it's a very good game. I don't think it's necessarily one I'm going to like very much. And it totally sucks as any kind of simulation. Don't try to look at it as that.